So we have already understood what we talk about. You see, Enothematic is a startup, and the video was very clear in showing the innovative spirit of this project, which is a global important project, and it is 100% Italian, which is something that for us could be a value added. Why not? Without being parochial. So we think that this testifies to the fact that Italy in this field enjoys a leadership position, and we should remember that we experts of communication should stress and underline this aspect. I will be very brief in my introduction because I believe that then the best thing is to hear from our speakers what they think about the topic. I believe that today we have more information than in the past. Many references we can learn from, and the market seems to be more open to the usage of wood, and this is due to the fact that technology and research and experts have been good in shedding light on how wood should be used in the right way. There is a product, a service rather, that could really contribute to increasing knowledge about this topic, and it is material that you can read online. You can actually download this material from the website on the slide, where we indicated also literature reference in terms of the most updated and authoritative papers on this topic, in Italian, by the way. So this is very interesting for all of us and very useful, I would say, for all of us. I believe that it is very important that we address the topic of aging in wood, in that this is one of the topics which are key for Enoforum. Among interesting topics, we have Querco treater penosites as an element of interest, and I hope that I did not mispronounce the word, which is one of the most interesting aspects in relation to aging in wood. This is something that helps us understand the sucrosité, which is a term which hardly translates into other languages, and that we therefore use in French. With reference to this topic, the markers of this organoleptic perception and sensation have been investigated. We will see whether they have been found. Have they been found? So actually it was a question for you, Professor Moutounet, who you are asked to comment on the topic of sucrosité.
Dans le bois de chêne Querco-triterpénoside.
So, Querco-triterpenosides have been recently identified for oak wood, and university dissertation works back already in 2012 highlighted the existence of these agents. in terms of their relevance for giving sucrosité to wine. That is a sugar expression which, though, is not accompanied by a high content or a higher content of sugar, which is something which is perceived in dry wines. So no extra fructose or sucrose, but a high perception of sugar anyway. 4 structures specifically have been identified, and recently a 5th one was identified, being an isomer. To date, Bordeaux University identified a series of these agents, substances, which belong to the family of triterpenoids. There are, or penosides, there are isomers involved, which include 4 with a sugary taste after being isolated, and which are especially of interest, therefore. Now, I would like to try and explain the name. Why quercotriterpenosides? Because this is the name because they were found first in oak wood. Hence, the name querco is the term that refers to oak. Querco, quercos, oak. It is not easy, though, to identify them and analyze them. So let's try and understand where we stand with research today. Their concentration in order for wine to display sucrosité is at 0.5 milligrams for liter. And so it is lower than in the case of sucrose and fructose. In order to communicate this sugariness or sucrosité, despite the low concentration, we have to understand that oak has variable concentrations of these substances. And this, of course, translates in different levels in wine. It seems that there is some variation. You possibly know the types of oak wood that are used: American white oak, the Alba variety. We do not have research work about the American oak wood, but when it comes to European oak, research does exist, and we have some information about the different levels depending on the specific oak type. After examining this aspect, I would like to address you about the bitterness aspect, which is linked to sucrosité or sugariness. One of these substances was known before the works by Alex Michel and present in oak, which gives bitterness to the wine. It is a bitter compound. It is bartogenic acid, which is a glycosate. In oak, we find additional components which do not belong to this family and which convey or give over this bitterness to wine. It's lignin at a concentration of 0.5 milligrams per liter. Lignolazinols are to be found especially in Quercus pedunculate and less in Rover sicilium. So I made reference to this bitterness because it has been evidenced that quercetriterpenoids perform an effect in terms of masking this bitter hint. And so, being it so, we understand that their presence counteracts the bitterness which is otherwise released into wine by the other substances. Well, thank you. We have to be brief, unfortunately, Professor Moutounet. You see, it is a countdown that we have to stick to. But anyway, of course, there is going to be additional questions about that. But what you said triggers two additional questions. Despite chips give oxygen to wine, is it correct to use microoxygenation in the tank and or aging of wood? And are there other molecules which are released by wood which perform an active role in the redox reactions? Well, it is a very big question. How much time do I have? You ask about microoxygenation.
Je dirais que le bois de chêne est associé historiquement au grand vin.
So, with reference to that and the usage of oak wood is associated to big wines, but in terms of barrels being used, barrique barrels being used, which entails not only the release of aromas, but also transfer of oxygen, which makes barriques the ideal container, so to say, to age wine. In addition to that, you also have noble lees and oxygen. But of course, oxygen in special conditions. In the case of a barrique, too, there is an interaction of oxygen. So we have oxidative phenomena, and they act at the interface between liquid and air, the surface of the wine, therefore. If the barrel is not full to the top, then this might happen, or in the staves, or through the staves, because wood is a microporous material, and in the pores you do have oxygen. So you do have this diffusion phenomenon at the interface. In older barrique barrels, the wood is imbued in for a few millimeters, 4 to 5 millimeters. There you have oxygen in the micropores, and it is there that phenomena take place, including oxidative phenomena, which though involve a limited portion of the whole. What you said about oxygen as a matter of fact, entailed that we would devote our attention to the technological aspect of microoxygenation. I remember how it was conceived in the beginning. I remember when everything started. We said that it was necessary that oxygen be brought in at a speed which entailed that it was administered, so to say, and consumed at the same time, which is what happens naturally in a barrel, in a barrique barrel. So this phenomenon of oxidation also entails phenomena involving radicals that we cannot dwell upon here. But all this contributes to the oxidation of the ethanol molecule, which becomes acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde, as you know, performs a fundamental role for the evolution of the pigment of reds. Through and by means of reactions triggered by ethanol, you have an association with anthocyanins, and there is a binding of molecules of anthocyanins. This is what I meant. So it is preferable to apply microoxygenation in the moment when there is the peak of anthocyanins at extraction, at the moment of extraction, which means performing all this as early as possible. I would like to add just one thing. You have to take into account the fact that wood is there. So with its tannins, vascalagine reacts with anthocyanins and other molecules and forms new pigments. Acetaldehyde also is involved. It does not always react with pentethanol. There is a competition, so to say, with other reactions leading to orange pigments. There is a competition in a way between various reactions. And yet the result of the presence of wood, and especially of microoxygenation in the favorable moment, entails that there is a more marked intensity of the color, which is something that is the result of intramolecular copigmentation. I hope I answered your question. Yes, thank you. Now, let's address another topic which is very important and which was introduced in the previous question, which is the topic of redox stability.
Once again, the question is for Professor Moutounet. Many people say that the use of oak during the aging of red and white wines contributes to reducing redox of odors, therefore improving the aromatic profile of the wines. Is there anything wrong with steel from a chemical standpoint?
Pour répondre à cette question,
to address this question, we need to address the reduction phase and the reduction compounds. I said this before, when you are in a situation where you have microoxygenation or you're using bricks, you are in a situation where oxygen is available, favoring slow reactions. So the oxidization and the use of oxygen results in oxygenated radicals. In the opposite situation where available is therefore not, when oxygen is therefore not available, and you have yeast residues, as we saw yesterday, there's a higher risk of HLS formation, sulfurated hydrogen, which is associated with yeast activity. However, we see in real life that in particular in the storage of wines in stainless steel tanks, especially the large ones, the ones that have a large capacity, in the presence of noble lees, we find these odors resulting from the sulfurated compounds, and ethanol is a good case in point. This is the sulfurated mechanism of the yeast during this stage that is resulting in these byproducts as a result of the presence of noble lees. And the same happens when you add sulfites very early at the end of fermentation, when you still have lots of yeasts around. In these compounds, you have a higher risk of oxidization, and these are also very reactive compounds, especially when it comes to the addition of nucleophiles, especially vis-a-vis viscalogen. This is what I was saying before. Viscalogen is capturing these compounds, and there are also other reactions, the well-known reactions, the best-known reactions, which is the formation by oxidation of semiquinones that react essentially with compounds that have a thiolic function, and these are compounds that are associated with reduction vinification techniques. There are also other compounds, and we've seen a few examples yesterday morning, other thiolic compounds that have aromatic characteristics that are very favorable, such as sulfonyl hexanol that we discussed yesterday. So this is the kind of balance that we needed to look for, and more specifically, the addition of oak and the role of tannins, and especially the tannins that come from oak, which contribute to oxidative reactions. So their presence, in other words, causes the consumption of oxygen to happen more quickly, because oxygen is captured more quickly, and also that creates a protection of the oxidizable compounds in wine. This reaction happens obviously in a more favorable situation where the redox potential is generally high, because of the presence of trace oxygen, which is permanently available. Vice versa, if it is preserved in stainless steel tanks, the opposite happens, especially when these tanks have a high capacity. And you know that if you place an electrode on the bottom of the tank, when you reach the sediments that have settled on the bottom, the redox value is much lower compared to the surface where you have dissolved oxygen. Therefore, the risk of to have low redox readings by adding sulfur dioxide, SO2. In other words, in this situation, involves the possibility of developing these sulfurate compounds, which are volatile and unwanted, such as HDS and ethanethiol. So the use of oak and wood generally in combination with micro-oxygenation is something that can help solving the problem. So thank you very much for this first round of answers. I would like to remind everybody of the many research papers he mentioned and the many topics which are all available at the website that was mentioned before, where there's a pamphlet and bibliography also in Italian. At the winery level, the developments in the winery, we've been talking about research. Let's now develop one of the most relevant topics, which is the use of alternative wood types alternatively to barriques. Is it just a window dressing for wines that are not so enjoyable, or is it going to open new international markets? What do you think? Well, I think that this is a true alternative. Then the fact that you can remediate wines that are not so enjoyable, as the question says, is also a fact. In our experience as a group, when alternatives were made legal in the European market, well, at the same time, our approach to foreign markets, to export markets, was also enhanced. And so that became a turning point for us of Caviro. That opened up new markets for us, and this experience probably happened. The early experiences were made by the mid of the decade after 2000, and they now have been in use for almost 15 years, and we've learned that there can be different needs according to the country, and this type of product is helping us address the various markets. I will not dwell on the strictly enological part, but thinking of the commercial part and the practical aspects involved, I have to say that we use them to a rather massive extent. And the fact that we needed to treat very large masses of wine made this product the key option to do all of this. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible, with the exception of very few products, to use barriques or larger casks, thinking of the volumes that we normally deal with. Another key aspect, and the question is also lingering in the wine world, also thinking of modern winemaking, is how much oak should be used. Is it hard to fine-tune and customize the boisé, the wooden notes that are so often criticized by the press in the wines? Yes, it is difficult. That's a fact. Because despite everything else, we winemakers, we're asking ourselves questions about whether customers still want their wines to taste oaky, and well, that still happens in many countries in the world. This is what we were saying before. We have different markets with different needs, and what customers want may be a different thing depending on the market. So it is necessary to customize the wines, and it's not easy to do that anyway. So the question is absolutely current. How much oak? How much wood? And there's a question mark for a good reason. New technologies, which is the key question for the entire Enoforum event, because we need to understand how close the future is. The systems that manage alternative wood infusions, automation oxygen dosage, are they only helping to keep the cost low, or are they going to develop more quickly new wine styles as required by the markets? I think it's the key concept is the second part of the question, open up new markets. I have to say that work at the winery is geared to developing as quickly as possible the right responses for the new wine styles that are in demand, because the timing is very tight. So the typical tests that people usually did based on lab tests with periodical tastings require a lot of time. And therefore, having tools that will make it possible to shorten that pipeline is truly key to us.
Direi che l'altro aspetto importante è appunto individuare
I would say that the other important aspect is to identify real-life responses, also in view of the demands and needs of this increasing market segmentation. So considering the existing differences between old and new world, it is necessary to increasingly reduce this competitive gap that exists today. Do you think that the use and management of oak and wood is a tool, is a key tool on which salespeople and winemakers should think together to address the new global market challenges? And we're thinking of the technical issues that we face today. Is dealing with these new tools with such issues a requirement to bring responses to the market? Yes, absolutely. I'd like to add something based on our own experience. Other than the technicalities of this, there's also another aspect that comes into play, and that's safety. Up until recently, we had always done work other than, well, I'm thinking of myself and the work I do. We don't harvest, it's our members that harvest, and we take care of the aging. Personally, I take care of aging. It has become essential for us to have to put bags of products that are very heavy in tanks and then remove them. Bags that are drenched in wine have a double weight compared to the initial weight. So my colleagues and myself have to deal with tanks that contain up to 5,000 hectoliters, and adding 500 kilos of chips is not something that, the winery workers like to do, because it's very, very unergonomic. So we needed to find convenient solutions, because that can be a problem. I mean, the lack of ergonomic qualities may not cause accidents, but they might be at home because they have a backache for 1 week. So safety is key today, and we should think twice about it. We've seen it in the previous video. This is something we needed to keep on our radar.